We all heard the complaints about the EOS R, that it's not a professional camera, it doesn't have pro features, so on and so forth. But back in September, I finally made a switch to the EOS R. So since I picked up the EOS R, I have not wanted to put it down since back in September. So yeah, it made me realize right after I got this camera, I went out and did a festival. I did a bunch of photos just to test it out because I'm mainly a photographer, then a videographer, and literally just shot one photo and I was like, oh, okay, I know this is just a neutral profile, but these photos look amazing. I was shooting in RAW, and then after I grabbed my iPad and I was like, all right, time to edit, finished it, sent it to them. They were like, oh, that was really quick. It was the color in this camera. Just go test it out. That's all I want to say about color because I can go on and so forth. And then stepping into that venue, it literally had minimal lighting. It maybe had 3-4 lights on stage where you can kind of see the people. And then some of the artists decided to be like, you know what, we just want one light. And I was like, all right, time to test out this camera on the first day. Completely passed the test for me. But then they had a second stage, which was underneath, which had the worst lighting I've ever been to. I thought some of the venues that I've been to here in town had the worst, but no, this one was really bad. It just had one light literally for the whole band. And I was like, all right, let's test this bad boy. And the photos came out great in my opinion for my first time trying to use this camera with an 85mm because that's my go-to lens. And then when I was in the venue testing out the lighting conditions and all that stuff, it just never clicked on me. I was like, oh, autofocus, I completely forgot about that. Yeah, autofocus in this camera is amazing. I'm using it right now. If I was using my Sony a7S, I would not be autofocus. It would be manual focus. I would be sitting here still as possible as I can because now I can actually just move all around, actually be in focus because the autofocus detection. But yeah, it just blew me out of the water. It just never clicked that how quick this autofocus was compared to my Sony a7S. And yes, I know that camera's pretty old, but I know I'm praising this camera with the autofocus, with the color science, and the megapixel 31. I was like, cool, I upgraded from a 12 megapixel to a 31. So the photos are sharp in my opinion. But there are some people that had cons about this camera when it first came out back a year ago, I think I want to say. All right, so one of the cons people really talk about this camera is the crop 4K. It crops in almost 2 times. It's like 1.7 times from the full frame sensor. Switching from Sony to this camera, I was like, okay, I can see why people were complaining about it, but I know some of you guys don't even use the 4K on your Sony. You guys are just stuck in the 1080, 120 frames per second, because that's how you pretty much get your smooth, slow-mo cinematic footage, is that 120. This camera does not have, sadly, only goes up to 60, but 60 for me is plenty enough. I'm trying to stay away from slow-mo shots. Only if I need a slow-mo shot, that's when I'll pull out to 60. But I'm trying to focus more on just like the normal 24 frames per second. People always complained that this camera is not pro because it does not have dual SD card slots. And I'm like, cool, who cares? So yeah, I made the switch to the Canon EOS R. It was calling my name when I was researching it. I would go back to this camera. I don't know why, maybe just because it was like the color science, or the people that were using this camera are the people that I'm like, cool, I want to make videos like that. But yeah, if you want a camera that's really easy to use, you don't have to set up or think about anything when you're out and running gunning, this is the camera for you. Because if you get the Blackmagic, you got to buy equipment for that stuff to rig it out. With Sony, you got to use S-Log to get like the best footage that I've seen people get. But you have to keep in mind, you have to expose differently every single time, and your exposure might not be there because you're running gunning. But with this camera, I'm not doing overexposing or underexposing because I'm like, cool, this looks good. So yeah, this camera has made filmmaking so much easier for me. I know people are going to be like, oh, you're not a true filmmaker because you don't want to use this stuff. I'm like, hey, story is king. Quality, yeah, it can look cool, but just get the story out there. And I will see you guys next time.